Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate it. I know everybody's busy, and we have a fire drill immediately following, so we're going to try to keep it concise and somewhat moving along. This is part two of a two-part series on video. The first one was about storytelling and figuring out, ways of telling a story. This is going to be a little more technical and focuses mostly on digital editing. We at the creative department have seen an increase in the demand for videos, and we noticed that it's really relevant to audiences, and we expect to be doing a lot more of it. So as we grow, a lot of our designers are also creating animated GIFs and animations. So we wanted to create a bit of a presentation to explain certain tips and techniques and best practices, because as people learn, obviously you're going to have to make mistakes and work on them and so on and so forth. So the purpose, of course, is also to reach out to other departments. If you have a good idea, a story, or just want to edit some videos, we're always looking for your input and also your content. Here's a quote that I really enjoyed. It's by Jean Oram. She's actually a romance novelist and doesn't do much video editing, but it was really relevant because editing is sort of deconstructing what you think you have as a story and then reconstructing it in any way you want. It's very powerful. So it's one of the reasons why I enjoy editing so much. And I'll give you guys a little background on myself. I went to film school. In context with marketing, editing has to really drive a point. So you have to really understand your story and be able to make those adjustments. So that's why we're going to be covering editing techniques, best practices, and workflows. The type of software that we use and the type of results that we expect from it. Because sometimes we can do edits right on, say, a mobile phone, or we can bring in all our footage, really high definition, really high quality, into a computer, go through all the sound mixing and effects and all that stuff, and end up with pretty much the same thing. Here is a breakdown of the steps that you would go through when creating your video edit. Obviously, you want to shoot your media, you want to transfer it. Because a lot of these cameras are digital now, you can record straight to your drive, take that footage, and using a cable, transfer it. Back in the day, you used to have to re-record from maybe one deck to another, and you'd have a lot of generation loss, so the more you record, the lower the quality. Nowadays, you can keep things pretty high res. It's an interesting paradox, because working in interactive, people want things to be really small, so they can run through the web and fit on a phone and play back on desktop and all this. But when you're working with video, especially for broadcast television, you want to shoot really high quality footage, which usually eats up a lot of space. You have two opposing forces. One that wants you to create really high quality stuff, and the other one's very compressed, streamable content. So the idea is you edit your video using the right software, and then you create all the effects and everything else, and then you export to different outlets. So if you're going to go to a phone, if you're going to go to YouTube, or you simply just want to archive it for a DVD, all those are different ways of exporting your footage. And we're going to cover a lot of that because there's 1,001 compression schemes or versions of compression that you can use, depending where you're going to set your export. Now, first question is, how does this relate to editing? Does anybody want to take a guess? Cutting versus layering? 3, 2. All right, well, nonlinear editing is the process of putting together a story from beginning to end. And the fact that it's nonlinear means you can move things around, but really you have a beginning, a middle, and an end, versus compositing, which is more of a layering process. So you take a clip and you start adding things to it, like titles or color correction or all these things, but it's really just a short clip. So you're building vertical sequences versus building a beginning to end sequence. So a good example is you wouldn't use Premiere to edit something like an animation because it's very tedious, as you can see by this picture. And you wouldn't use After Effects to edit like a wedding video that's 2 hours long because, again, this doesn't do playback in real time. So you literally would have to sit there re-rendering and it's incredibly tedious. So both of these programs have their specific functionality or purpose. And that's really what we want to sort of discuss today, is which is which and when to use them, what are the strengths and weaknesses. So our average system, whether it's Mac or PC, all these different specifications for hardware that are really important to have. Most laptops and stuff can handle it, especially video shot on the phone. But when you start working with high quality cameras and that type of footage, you're going to need a really good computer. What we see here are just different types of software that would fit each one of these machines. So nonlinear editing, like I said, editing from beginning to end, clips, without effects and all that crazy stuff, would include Adobe Premiere, Apple Final Cut, Sony Vegas, and they're called NLEs, or nonlinear editors. You can do some layering with them, it's just not convenient, it's not practical, and it takes a lot longer. Like we showed before, once you finish your edits, you want to go back and then do your effects. And that's where this comes in, the compositing software. When you invest in Adobe Creative Suite, you have access to both of these programs, Premiere and After Effects, for the same price. So for $50 a month, which is what we do per account, people have access to use either or. And the nice thing is you can edit your sequence in Premiere and then save it and open it in After Effects and layer it. So it's really convenient for working. This is an example of our current portfolio, video portfolio. So if you guys want to check out some of our work, we have a good amount of pieces right now available. We're going to be adding more. This is probably 6 months old so far. But you'll see a good range of footage from 3D animation to live action. There's a lot of motion graphics involved. And so there's different, obviously, styles of editing, which I think we covered last time, but we'll touch on them a little more. Here are some of the capabilities that we have at IMI for producing videos. Like I said, when we edit, we can edit to the web, to mobile, or for TV. We can create motion graphics, which is a little different from animation in the sense that it doesn't need to really tell so much of a story. It just really has to drive something like animated cartography or visual effects. It's more of a visual kind of eye candy. So that's the thing with motion graphics that's different from animation. Location and studio productions means if you want to shoot, say, actors or exchanges. And we have some examples of a few projects that we've done here. And then obviously transcoding and rich media authoring. What that means is that we can get one format and turn it into another format. So QuickTime or AVIs, Windows Media, I'm sure you guys have all seen all these different formats that may play on some players, may not play on others. So that's part of the transcoding purpose. Our clients will send us all sorts of different footage, and we need it for YouTube, or we need it for a phone, or whatever. So that's usually what this covers, and we'll go over some of the tools that we use for creating those different types of formats. And so here's a good example of a recent video that we created. This is BioClarity. This video was created entirely in Adobe After Effects. And so when I talk about layering, this is what I'm talking about. These are all the different layers. And each one of these little boxes includes another timeline, just like this one, that's been sandwiched together into a clip. So what that does, it allows us to create something like, say, multiple layers of text. And they all move. And then you sandwich them into another layer like this one. And then you've got multiple other layers, just like. So there's a lot of levels that you can go in and out of that really help for timing and for creating those type of really complicated effects that seem pretty seamless. So I'll show you guys a real quick example of that type of layering. So you see right here, all these things are moving sort of in unison. What we're looking at is just layers upon layers upon layers. So most of these things were created in Photoshop and then moved in After Effects. Some of the video clips live in the background. All this stuff is designed usually. Our visual designers would create really nice Photoshop files with all of the type and everything else. And we get them, open them in After Effects, convert them or transfer them any way we need to then make them move. And so what you see here is sort of the hierarchy of how all these layers will relate, and we can open those up deeper and deeper. So it's pretty fun. Different though from layering is the editing. So the editing in Adobe Premiere, you notice there's only one video layer and multiple audio layers. Why Premiere is so valuable, say for someone like myself, is because I can get my footage in real time and play it back. I can't do that in After Effects. In After Effects, I literally have to cache everything with my computer, wait for it to load up, and then it will play a little clip of it, real small snippets. Because it's so heavy, this stuff really adds up, especially with high definition footage. Clips can range probably 2 gigabytes per minute. So, and that's on an average 1920 or 1080 pixel. We'll cover pixels later on. So when you're looking at something like 4,000 pixels, which is kind of the average now for high def, it could easily be 5 gigabyte clips that you're playing back and forth. So don't be surprised if your computer crashes every now and again, because it's pretty hefty stuff. For SoClean, one of the reasons we chose to use Premiere over After Effects is because we wanted to tell a story that had a lot to do with the actors exchanging sort of banter and a little more about performance. But sound effects were also very important to us. So that was the reason Premiere was a lot better, so we could play back things over and over and over again, which you will do when you edit, until you find a good combination of sound and picture. And we're going to discuss a little bit about editing techniques, especially J cuts and L cuts, and we'll get more into that. This is a combination of both, Adobe Premiere and After Effects. So for this particular client, we received some what they call red camera footage. Now these files are massive. As I was saying, they're 4,096 pixels, and what that means is little dots that make up the image. So they go from top all the way to bottom right, and each one of those little tiny pixels carries color information, and that's really what renders this image, is 4,000 pixels going this way by 2160 pixels going this way, and it creates your entire mosaic. So we get this huge file. We have to then bring it into Premiere, render it, and convert it into something that we can play back. Once we have an edit done and we have our timing and our music and everything scored, we can take this project in here, and what happens at this point is we're not going to go back and clean all this up. We're done here, but we can start layering stuff like color correcting and putting vignettes to darken the edges and adding titles and that sort of thing that really adds to the final result. I mean, we could do those things here, but it's going to take 3 times longer. It's not really practical. You can't start playing it back in real time anymore because those layering effects eat up a ton of space, and they slow down your graphics cards. So it's really knowing when and how to layer these things that makes such a big difference. But again, that comes through practice, and the more you guys do this, the better you get at it. Does anybody shoot like for fun or just their own videos and stuff? What do you usually use for capturing your footage?
Well, it's not my stuff, but we use black magic cameras.
Nice, yeah, those are pretty good.
Yeah.
High definition footage and
then for photography, Canon 5D.
Yeah. So both of those are great sources, and you're going to get uncompressed footage that's really high quality. Again, you can take stills, you can animate them, you can put text over them, you can combine them with video. So the most important part is, of course, getting good footage. So like they say, trash in, trash out. If you get good footage, it's going to help you at it a lot more. So this is the example of the final result of combining those things. It's one of my favorite spots that we created here, and I'll give you a warning. The client, they went with a totally different direction, but it's still one of my favorite pieces. It's inspired on a Gucci spot that Irene recommended. So you'll notice we're using, this is the red camera footage, and one of the good things we were able to do is lookup tables to give us this kind of color. It looks like a little bleach bypass, or kind of muted certain colors and highlighted others. There's some ramping effects here. You see how it speeds up and slows down. All those things were created afterwards. Like we'll fix it in post type of thing. We added flares to transition, a lot of them. We also created this really slow kind of transition sequence. So every time you fade, it's at least 5-second fades. There's some cropping and other stylistic decisions that were made here and there. But at the end of the day, the whole goal was to create something that was about the user and sort of the intimacy of the device, and being able to enjoy the luxury of all these amenities and so on and so forth. And so that brings us to L cuts and J cuts. What you probably saw was that there were times when the music started first and then the cut followed, or there were times where the cut stayed and the music changed early. And what that does is it creates different feelings for the viewer. Say, for example, a J cut, where you see that the audio comes in a little early, even though the scene is here. What it does, it forebodies, or it gives you a little sense of foreshadow, like something's coming. Maybe you're indoors and your next cut is going to be outdoors. So you put a little bit of street sound in first, and then you cut to it. So the viewer is already kind of familiar within a few seconds or a few milliseconds that this is coming. So it's a great way to set things up. The L cut, on the other hand, is a little different, because say you're trying to reach a conclusion in a shot before you get to the next shot, and you may not hear it. Like somebody's going to slam the door, but you don't really see it. You can hear it, and then cut the reverse of the person's door hitting them in the face or something. Those type of things will really help visually communicate a message a lot better than just straight boring cuts, because it does get a little repetitive after a while. So that's where these two techniques are really helpful. I use both of them. You picked up on it in a subconscious level. That leads us to some of the 5 most important things that I usually think about when editing. Because we're working what a lot of people call the 4 dimensions. So it's X, Y, Z. So meaning you can move from left to right, top to bottom, in and out. But you also have time. So all those things put together give you a lot of flexibility. The important thing is to mark your changes over time, and that involves what they call keyframes. So say, for example, frame 0, you put a keyframe of opacity or the brightness of an image at 0, and then by 1 second you put that opacity at 100. You mark those changes. So gradually you're fading in. That's technically all you're doing. Or if you wanted to translate something from here to here, you would mark the location here, mark the location there in time from 0, 0 to 1 second, and then make your change. So that's really a great way of controlling effects and those type of adjustments. Now, number 2 is adjustment layers. And I know this may seem a little advanced, like right away, but it's going to make a lot more sense. And what adjustment layers do is, you notice how we had a lot of cuts in our timeline? Well, you can put a layer that covers all of those in one shot. So if you want to make an effect, I don't know, maybe make everything black and white, you don't have to go through every cut and make it black and white. You can just use one adjustment layer, throw it on top of all your cuts, and it will adjust everything underneath. So that's where they're really powerful, almost like a master layer. Color correction is really, really important. And you notice there, I'm not sure, I think for that particular ARIA shoot, we use multiple cameras, but a lot of times we'll have, say, a phone or a still camera or, Pixelvision. I mean, there's so many formats that we work with. So at the end of your edit, you really want to match that footage to make it seem like one specific look and feel. Sometimes you do want it to look different. I mean, Bob Richards, cinematographer, has done a lot of movies for Oliver Stone and thing. He loves to capture from all sorts of cameras. Of course, audio, and right here we have an audio tool. Now this tool goes up and down as we play back. And this is within Premiere, and we have the same tool in After Effects, although we don't do much audio editing at all in After Effects. It's usually here. So as it goes up, it's going to go from green to yellow to red. You want to keep it around 20 decibels, so the green, yellow area. And that's usually when you've got headphones on, everything sounds great. It's when you render and you play it back that you realize, oh my God, this is too loud or it's too low. And so that's a great visual cue of knowing where you are in terms of your levels. Finally, speed adjustments, like you just saw, it really helps fit a certain gap of time. You can slow it down a little bit, make it fit, or maybe you want to speed things up. So it really asks the visual language to be able to make those adjustments in time. These are examples of some editors that are available for, say, YouTube. You can literally bring in your clips. You can cut, fade, add music, or customize your titles and stuff. It's pretty simple, pretty easy editor. I've used it a couple of times. It's not bad. And if you don't want to go too far into learning Premiere or After Effects, this is a really quick way of getting an easy edit done. These are some examples of mobile applications that can help you edit right on your phone, which is pretty impressive. Of course, you need a good phone. Obviously, you need a phone that's going to have enough space and it's going to be fast enough to handle those videos. But we've used Quick for GoPro footage before. It's pretty good, pretty stable. I haven't really used a lot of these because I'm on a pretty cheap Android, so my phone doesn't hold much than a couple of 100 megabytes. It's easy to fill up with a few gigabytes when you record 10 minutes of video. So I will include all these links. You guys can go check them out and see which one may work best for your phone. As far as stock, we do have access to a lot of different libraries. And what happens is, say you don't want to go film birds all day because you need some clips of nature or whatever, you needed some music or you needed some special effects or sound effects, we can go buy them and then use that stuff in our edit. So these are different locations that you can go to find, say, music soundtracks, or if you want a specific font to type out animated typography or something. So review these guys and see the different styles and looks of footage that you can have. Usually what you will see is you can download some watermark versions of them just to try out and see if you like them, if they fit. You don't have to commit to buying them. If you do like them, then we can put them on light boxes, especially for Shutterstock, which is the one that we use the most. Mostly stock for photos and illustrations. We'll go through Shutterstock. What light boxes help us do is we'll take this footage and we'll sort it into a particular landing page. And in that landing page, you can name it by your client, and all those clips will live there. So in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you want to go back. Oh, what footage did I use for this or that? You can save it all there before you buy it, show it, do your edit, get some feedback. And then when you're ready to finalize it, you can go back to your Lightbox and download the high quality version of it. So it's really helpful. There's a lot of free stuff, I strongly recommend, outside of Wikipedia that has the Creative Commons licensing, I would probably avoid using free stuff because it's not really free. Half the time there's always some small print that says if it's going to be for commercial purposes, they want to get a piece of the action, I guess. So be very careful when you use that. I've had friends get sued before for using clips, and it's not fun. You will get a letter. People somehow find out. So it's really, helpful to use your comps, use the free stuff, show it to your client, get approval, and then we'll buy it. That's really worth the investment. You may think you're getting away with it, but maybe a year, maybe 2, maybe 3 years later, you'll get a letter saying that this clip belongs to someone. So if you're making money out of something, just remember you have to pay the people who help you build that. Editorial, when you see the word editorial on a stock site, it's usually highlighted in red, and what it means is that this footage is not for commercial purposes. Say somebody goes out and films a parade, and there's people walking in the shot and stuff. Those people need to sign a release form in order for their faces to be used on a commercial environment or a commercial piece. So stuff like that, if it says editorial, you can show it to a client for a comp or internal, but you can't use it for something that you're going to release to the public because obviously it doesn't have full copyright licensing. Next, these are editing workflows here, and there's just a couple of things that we like to stress, especially within our projects. We work with so many different projects and so many different clients that it's important to have standards to help us get into autopilot and focus more on the story, not so much on the, where did I put this file, or do we have the right fonts, did we back it up? And believe me, more often than not, if you don't have a backup, you're going to be in trouble at some point because you're going to need to retrieve that footage. Somebody's going to ask you for it in a month, in a week, in a year. So it's really, really crucial. In order to find a lot of stuff, obviously good naming conventions. So here at IMI, we like to start with a client name, give it a size, talk about the campaign, the version, and obviously the file format. Having that sequence of information in your title will help you search for things a lot quicker, and some of those videos will include, hundreds of clips of footage and render files and all sorts of assets that go into it. So it's really important to be able to find them quickly when you need to retrieve a project. I personally like to save multiple versions of whatever I'm working on. So I'll have one timeline. For example, the fire clarity timeline. And I'm working on it, 20, 30 minutes into it, I'll save, but then I'll save as _safety. It's just another project, because I'll be honest, oftentimes the computer will crash, your file will get corrupted, or you save it in the wrong place, or stuff happens. So having that safety, that second file version of it, is a huge vest, Next, Adobe libraries. Adobe libraries are something that we're using with the Creative Cloud. So if you're using Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects, any one of these software applications will have a little palette, and it's going to have all sorts of graphics and fonts and colors and things that pertain to your specific project. So for us, say for example, we have a client, we'll immediately create a library of their logos, their font styles, the type of colors that they use, and so we'll refer to that library constantly as we work on a project. Why it's important is because we can share those libraries with other designers, and so if you're working on print or you're working on video, it will keep those elements consistent. I know with Word, with Tech, we do a lot of stuff where the buttons have to be a certain size or have certain font styles. And so if we make an update, we update it to the library, and all those elements will then update themselves. It's really, really helpful to sort of keep that control on your assets. Folder structures. This is usually how I like to set up my projects. So assets include stuff like documentation, PDFs, client notes or briefs. If you have mood boards and stuff, I usually put all that stuff there because it's my reference folder, and I'll go in and out and look at stuff as I'm building things. Audio will include voiceovers or music, sound effects. Footage is usually all the stuff that we capture. So say if cinematographer brings back a drive full of stuff, all that footage goes in here. We usually like to convert it to a format that we can work with, and we'll cover that in a little bit. But if you have a lot of footage from all over the place, which can happen, last year's company video included a ton of different sources, and it kept crashing, and we're like, what's going on? Why is this crashing? And of course, some clips were gigabytes big, and other clips were like 300K. So, that combination of stuff can really create problems. So what we like to do is take all that footage and convert it into one format that we can all use. Usually QuickTime is the format that we work with the most. And Photo JPEG is a really good codec, which I'll explain later on. Images, so if you have any stills or anything like that, they usually go in here. Those images can be cut up, used up in Photoshop and exchanged with After Effects. And then all of our final renders or the compositions that we create, we can save them in the renders folder. And as we create different versions, I like to keep the old versions, especially for comparing beginning to end, what you started off with and what you end up with. So I usually don't delete that stuff. It does add up, so be mindful that your hard drive space may get clogged. And then moving on, importing video files. I think I just covered that briefly, which means try to import files that are consistent and that are preferably the same format so they can live in the same timeline and coexist in a way that's friendly and won't crash your system. For stills, we recommend the PNG format over the JPEG format. Both of these formats are really small and lightly compressed, but the reason I like PNGs over JPEG, especially for video editing, is they preserve your color information a lot better, so your images will look a lot brighter and more saturated. It's a lot nicer, less compressed. But it also has an alpha channel. I'll explain that in a minute as well, which basically means transparencies. So if you have something that kind of floats, like a logo, for example, that alpha channel is really important, those transparencies, because maybe you want to change the backgrounds, or maybe you want it to float. So those type of things are only achieved through the PNG format. Now the Photoshop files, or PSDs, they can be imported as layers. So say in Photoshop you create a really complex kind of graphic with all these different layers, and all these folders, they equal a layer in Photoshop. And inside that layer, you may have clarity, and then another layer will have the seal, and another layer will have the text. And so all these things put together in Photoshop can then be sent over to After Effects, and they'll show up already stacked. So all you really have to do at that point is start putting your keyframes, which are these little dots here, to mark your changes over time. So that really speeds up the process a lot. You don't have to recreate everything that you make in Photoshop. Again, in After Effects, you can literally just open the file and have it load up properly. You have another quote, but basically what it's saying is, you have the opportunity to create reality or re-expose your story in different ways. But what makes it art is that you can juxtapose. You can put all sorts of different things against each other visually through audio. So there's a lot of power in being able to tell a story the way you want, or tell different stories. And so that kind of brings us into more of the technical reference. What I have following here is a lot of different standards. And so these are things that happen to video. Yeah, frame rates and stuff like that you may want to reference over time, especially stuff like color. Why is my color flickering and stuff like that? So I cover a lot of that in here. Also, if you're going from 24 frames to video, because frame rates vary, cameras like to record 30 frames for video footage or 60 frames for video games or anything like apps. All those different frame rates will give you different problems. So that's where this reference will be useful. As far as time code, when cameras record, they obviously want to keep track of time, and if you have multiple cameras, you want to keep that time consistent. So if you have camera 1, camera 2, camera 3, they all have to start at the same time. So as you edit, you can match those moments in time without having to scroll through your timeline and figure out a specific point. So that's where time code is really important. We don't do a lot of stuff for broadcast, or the stuff you see on television. Most of our stuff goes straight to web. So it's not as important anymore. But I know a couple of years ago that was really crucial. These are some comparison of effects that happen over time and effects that happen over space. So usually transitions are a good example of spatial. So within a frame, you want to make a change from one part to another, but it's not over time. It's really over space. And these are more of the keyframe changes that I was talking about. You can have things fading really quickly, or slowly and gradually, or kind of bounce, like if you want to translate something and give it a little bit of a bounce. So those are also the tweening things that I have in here. Aspect ratios, as we here at IMI use 16:9, which is sort of like this screen. But when editing for, say, Instagram or doing stuff for Facebook, there's different sizes. So when we capture our footage, we want to start big, and it's always easier for us to make it smaller than it is to take small footage and stretch it. It usually falls apart. So always think of that. Even if it's a really huge clip, we would rather work with that first and bring it small than have something really small and try to stretch it out. And so these are examples of different types of screens and how that renders. Bitrate. This was really important for us, especially with HealthNet recently, because say Hulu versus YouTube, to have different requirements. And what happens is, a lot of that is how much data can be sent to make that video playback over the internet, over the bandwidth. So the higher the bit rate, obviously the better quality, but it's also heavier, so it could stutter, it could stop. What helps a lot is understanding when to use constant bit rate and when to use variable bit rate. For us, it's, obviously that's a little more technical for you guys if you're just trying to edit something quick. But for us, when we get that type of footage, we want to make sure that we usually end up with a variable bitrate that can adjust depending on the user's bandwidth. So if you have a good connection, it can give you more data within that bandwidth, or it can give you less data, just so that you can keep playback consistent. And these are the codecs that I was talking about. So these are different ways of rendering your file. Apple, for example, uses ProRes, and that's a codec that they own. It does really well for capturing QuickTime movies. Obviously, it's not PC friendly, so we end up having to convert. Usually, DivX is another codec that uses 265. It's a type of MPEG that plays everywhere, especially phones on the web. There's a 265, which is the next level. These are audio codecs, so they help, for Dolby surround sound, or if you wanted to create stereo versus mono. And then these are the players. These are sort of the places where you play your rendered footage. So most of these are pretty much free. You can get them everywhere. There's the Windows, Macintosh. Those are more proprietary. Obviously MP3. This is a free open source, and WAV files, which are really high quality audio players. And here's a copy of the type of software that we use to transcode or convert from one format to another. And finally, it's a screenshot of how we go about making our settings for the different type of versions that we make. So say, for example, something like a Legoland spot has some typography, there's some images, obviously a lot of white. We don't want the white to be too bright so it doesn't flicker and stuff. And this is where we set our bit rate. This is where we set out the quality. We'll do multiple passes sometimes if you can afford it, where the computer will go render the video and then goes back and renders anything that may be off. So it takes twice as long, but if you're leaving at the end of the day, you can leave it overnight. And then this is a little cheat sheet that we have for different type of social media platforms, so Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and it gives you more of an understanding of the type of length of your video, the size of your video, what kind of dimensions, width and height, and that sort of thing. And they're constantly changing, so it's good to just reference this from time to time. That's kind of my presentation.